This video is about 3% rent max, meaning landlords can only go up as high as 3%. People have been angered and bothered by high rents and they want change. You heard the chants. They say, what do we want? 3%. What do we want? 3%. What do we want? 3%. 3% now. People are mad. They want 3% max on their rent. And so they're masking together. In some areas, they even unionizing. They want 3% max, meaning that the landlord can never go above 3% no matter what. But my question is that really possible? And if that did happen, what would be some of the consequences if the landlord could only go up 3%? Now, I'm not neither for it or against it. I'm just a news guy, and I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this. So let's say if the landlord can only go up 3%, what happens with his expenses, right? Don't forget, when you run in a building or a house or whatever, you're going to have some expenses. And what are some of those expenses? Well, if you're doing the lighting around the property, well, you got a light bill. And if you're giving out some cable, well, now you got a cable bill. And if you trying to do the upkeep around the property and prevent stuff before it happens, then you got what's called preventive maintenance, where you're scraping old paint off the garage or off the window sills, or you're tuck pointing some of the areas that needs to be refilled with mortar. And what about if it's a bigger property and you need security? Security costs money these days, right? And then you got your mortgage. And if you got a mortgage on a fixed rate, well, you might be okay there. But what if it's an adjustable rate? And what if it's like a 228 where all of a sudden the 2 years are over with, now you got to refinance. But for now, you got to do something about that mortgage. Inflation, inflation was high. It just came down. The Fed just brought it down, last year? And this year, I mean, at one point we had a high of 9 to 10%, and he got it all the way down to 2.75 or 3% these days. Haven't checked lately, but you get what I'm saying. So prices were higher across the board. Even if you was buying food, your dollar didn't even go far as far as buying food or getting your car fixed or whatever the deal was. Prices were high. And what about property taxes? Property taxes have been going through the roof, as well as property insurance. Property insurance, they even cutting certain customers off, saying that we don't even want your money. They pulling out of certain areas, and the areas they stay in, they giving like 20, 30, 40% increase, right? And then don't forget your water. We all need water. And then what about the repairs when that furnace go out or the boiler go out, or you have some type of emergency? It costs money for that, right? And the janitorial, you gotta have somebody around there cleaning it, or else it's just gonna build up with a lot of garbage and paper and everything else. And you gotta heat it. If you heating that property, you know what I mean. It costs money to heat. I remember the days when I used to be a landlord and I used to heat the property, and some would call me and complain that it was too cold. Some would say it was too hot. And I would go by the building when the tenant said it was too cold and all the windows up. That's my money going out that window. So I had to eventually go with separate heat. It costs money to do that, but in the long run, it really paid off. I went with separate heat, separate gas, and that cut the cost. But, you have some buildings that still, supply the heat. What about lawn care? You got to have lawn care because if you don't, you're going to have grass like 4 feet tall. And then you got to have snow removal. What if you're in an area that you get a lot of snow? Somebody got to get it up. And, maintenance in general, you got to have. So it goes back to, can you really get away with a max of 3%? When I was a landlord, sometimes I had to go up almost 8, 9%, depending on what happened. Some things is out of your control, like property taxes. Yeah, you can reassess them, but that don't mean that you're gonna get that break. And property insurance, you're pretty much at the mercy of the insurance industry. You might be able to say, well, we won't take that, we'll take this, or we'll have a higher deductible. But at the end of the day, you're still at the mercy of the insurance company. And you've seen on TV many times where some of these buildings are in bad shape. And that's why you have to have some type of money to do these repairs. Nobody wants to pay, high anything, but it starts to show when you don't have the money to work with, and then now you got a roach infestation, or termites, and you didn't have an exterminator coming out regularly, and now they done got out of control. And what if the furnace or boiler go out and you don't have the money to fix it? Now the people are cold. What about in the summertime when the AC go out? And you seen on TV where or the internet where the people are saying it's hot in here. The AC been on for almost a year. So you gotta have some money to do these things. Now, am I an advocate for high rents or low rents? No, I'm in the middle. I'm the neutral guy. But I'm just putting out here. I hear the tenant side and also hear the landlord side. And what really happens is, what are some of the consequences if you do a max, especially to a mom and pop? You're probably driving them out of business because what you're doing is saying when expenses go above 3%, now you as the owner got to come out of your pocket and make up the difference. Well, I think the mom and pop was in business to make a living and to make money off the property, not contribute to or lose money. So that would be short-lived for that mom and pop. And the only ones that you would get after the mom and pop is the corporations. Now the corporations, they won't care how you feel. They're going to find a way to get what they need. See, and the corporations, they're going to say, okay, you want to freeze this at 3%? As people move out, they jack the rent up to whatever they think would be sustainable for them. So, for instance, if the rent was $1,500, well, they're going to jack it up to $2,000 or $2,400 now. And they're going to make sure they pad it, whereas that they can still do the 3%, but then they still got a nice cushion in case things go south. But what does that do to the vulnerable renters, the people that really don't have a lot of money? Well, they're going to be, out, right? Because they can't afford it. They can't afford no $2,000 rent or no $2,400. I can't even afford that. So it would just be tough. And like I said in some of my other videos, it's getting to the point where people are starting to cohabitate together because rents and the cost of living is getting so expensive, you just can't afford to do it on your own anymore. And I guess you just got to hope whoever you cohabitating with can carry their end of the expenses, because other than that, you just be in a heap of trouble. So that's all I have for you. Again, this is Kay, back at it with a new video. Take care, guys and gals.